Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jin Liu. I'm a real estate and finance attorney with the law firm of Carlton Fields, and I also chair our firm's development industry group. Our group hosts a series of events called Community and Development, where we convene community leaders and explore important issues that impact real estate and economic development. Today, as our fall 2021 edition of the Community and Development series, we have invited Mr. Brian Auld, President of Tampa Bay Rays, to discuss its sister city plan. A few housekeeping matters. First of all, if you have any questions, please put in the Q&A box and do not use the chat box. And the second one is that we will be recording today's program, which will become available at our firm's website, as well as a few other sites where our firm hosts content. So now let's turn to our speaker today. Just a little bit about Brian before we start our program. This year marks Brian's 16th season with the Rays and the 7th year as the team president. Brian has accomplished many amazing things during his tenure with the Rays. For instance, in the year of 2018, Brian and Matt Silverman oversaw the Rays acquisition of the Tampa Bay Rowdies soccer team. Brian and Matt now also serve as the vice chairman of the Rowdies, overseeing all franchise operations. And there is a little bit fun fact about Brian. His previous work experience includes serving as lead teacher and director of development for the East Palo Alto Charter School in California. And I also find it very impressive that Brian came with a very impressive educational background. He earned an MBA from Harvard Business School and a bachelor's degree in economics, as well as a master's degree in education, both from Stanford University. But what's most relevant to today's discussion, though, is the fact that Brian and Matt Silverman lead the club's operations both internally and externally, including their proposed innovative plan for the team to build home stadiums in both Tampa Bay and Montreal and divide their home games across 2 geographic locations. So Brian, first of all, congratulations on such an amazing season for the Rays. We're so happy to see that they just clinched its second straight AL East title and also has won a record number of 98 games. Definitely, I can tell you that in my household, all we wanted to talk about with our boys is a Rays game. Every morning, if they can't wake up, but we tell them that, for example, somebody just hit another home run, like last night, I think G-Man did a 3-run home run, they would wake up right away, get excited. So let's talk about business, about the sister city plan. Brian, for some of our audience who may not be as familiar with this plan, can you just walk us through a brief overview of the underlying drive for this plan as well as its core elements?
Sure. In a nutshell, we're trying to build 2 intimate outdoor ballparks, one in Tampa Bay and one in Montreal. And the idea is to play games in each of those ballparks when the weather is beautiful in each of those markets. Because Montreal and Tampa Bay are both on the East Coast, every game could be on television and radio for all fans whenever we play. And it makes it relatively easy to travel according to the Major League Baseball schedule. Here in Tampa Bay, the idea would be to play all of our spring training games and then the first portion of the season up through June when it starts to get a little rainy and a little too hot to play baseball in Tampa Bay, and then move up to Montreal during the latter months of the season when the weather up there is beautiful and it's not too cold to play outdoor baseball. The Rowdies, which you mentioned, and I appreciate it, and thank you for the very kind introduction across the board, would also use this facility as their home field, or home soccer pitch, if you will. And so that comes with another 20 to 24 games a year as well.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for that overview. But let's talk specifically about the timeline here. We know that timeline is very important for any business, especially when we're talking about building 2 stadiums and get the fans buy-in, the community buy-in. So can you walk us through the timeline here, perhaps from the back end when the Tropicana Field lease will terminate, and work your way back on some of the milestone steps along the way that are necessary to make the plan happen?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's why there is some urgency to what we're doing. We don't have a place to play for the 2028 season. Our use agreement at Tropicana Field expires at the end of the 2027 season. And St. Petersburg has a lot of plans for what they want to do with the 86 acres on which we sit. And so we've got to figure out where we're going to be no later than that, obviously. And we also have to get a new ballpark built, or two new ballparks built, if we're successful with our sister city plan prior to that time period. It can take 3 to 4 years to build a ballpark. It can take a year or two to figure out all the economics and funding mechanisms that are going to go into it. And so we're sitting here in 2021 with a deadline of 2027. There's a whole lot to do. This is the thing that keeps me up at night more than anything else.
So specifically on that timeline, when do you have to make a decision on the site selection?
I hate to put drop dead dates out there, because that's not necessarily how this will work. But one can imagine, obviously, that if we don't have a pretty good sense of where we're going to be by the end of 2022, we get to a point where we have to start forcing decisions, and that's something that we're going to work really hard to try to avoid.
Right. So let's move on to the next kind of very important question on a lot of people's mind, right? I understand from your overview that the use of the new stadium will incorporate not only half of the home games for Rays, but also spring training games and also Rowdies games. So in total, that sounds like making up about 70 to 80 games in total for the stadium. But I think one of the narratives we continue to hear in our community is that people think that only 40 games to be played at the new stadium. And they feel like it's half of the economic benefits, while you're asking the community to still bear the entire burden of building a new stadium. Do you agree with that statement? If not, can you articulate any specific benefits of a shorter season to the local community?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a lot there, and I'll try to address all the points in order. But I'd also say that when we've asked our fans and our community leaders, why are we having so much trouble drawing good-sized crowds to Tropicana Field? We often hear about how baseball is meant to be played outdoors. We hear that there's just too many baseball games. 81 games is just too many, and that the games can be too long. So we're trying to address a couple of those issues here. With respect to the 40 games and the economic impact, what has happened already in Montreal and what we're in the middle of conducting down here are economic impact studies. And in the province of Quebec specifically, they're not allowed to count any dollar that would have otherwise been spent in Quebec, anywhere in the province, as incremental. It only includes dollars that would have come outside of the province and into it. Otherwise, it's considered substitution. And they've studied this and determined that a new ballpark in this circumstance is going to provide as much economic impact, if not more, than a full season. We believe the same thing is true here. One of the biggest reasons is tourism. We currently, as the Rays organization, do not drive a whole lot of economic impact for our spring training season. Unlike the Blue Jays and the Yankees and the Phillies who spring train down here, we don't bring thousands of visitors and put in lots of heads in beds and hotel room nights and time in restaurants from outsiders, from people in Philadelphia, New York, and Toronto, yeah, specifically. So this is going to bring thousands of Montrealers down, not just for spring training, but also for the first portion of the season. And that's money that otherwise wouldn't be spent in this community. Our preliminary economic impact studies suggest that despite having fewer games, we'll drive even more economic impact than a full season would.
Thank you for that. Now let's put a little bit of focus on the stadium design. Given the reduced number of games played at each ballpark, is the team willing to live with a stadium that's less expensive than the traditional stadium? If that's the case, how do you make a less expensive stadium equally or even more successful? Does that include, for example, enhance the fans experience, or perhaps more expensive seating, including more club seating, or other factors?
Well, the biggest thing we can do is build a stadium that's appropriately sized for our community. The irony about stadium construction in general, I don't know if irony is the right term, but the weirdness about it is the seat that you charge the least amount of money for in the upper deck is the one that is the most expensive to build. So by building a 25,000 seat ballpark, by not needing a retractable roof, we're going to save hundreds of millions of dollars off the cost of the ballpark. That's one of the main impetuses for doing this. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to have all the same amenities that a larger stadium would have. It just means you're going to have them in a smaller environment. So we will certainly have premium seating. We'll have clubs. We'll have all sorts of special areas. We'll also have really affordable sections. It's just going to be smaller than you would otherwise see.
Okay. But in terms of the event to be held within the stadium, in addition to the ball games, soccer games, and spring training games, what are the other things that could potentially take place within the stadium that can also promote economic growth?
So anything and everything is the short answer to that. We are incredibly excited about a 25 to 28,000 seat venue outdoors in Tampa Bay during the winter months. That is the time that festivals and concerts and pretty much anything you can imagine will really excel here. And so we'll have that ability, and it nestles in nicely between our indoor arena, which hosts about 18 or 19,000, and Raymond James Stadium, where the Buccaneers play, which is a 70,000 plus capacity. Also, because we're designing with baseball and soccer in mind from the outset, we can host tournaments of all kinds year round. Travel team sports in particular are a great economic driver. And by being able to attract football, lacrosse, field hockey, anything that goes on a rectangular field, in addition to softball and baseball and all those other sports that would fit onto a baseball diamond, we can appeal to the entire world and say, hey, come here, bring your tournaments here. The weather's going to be incredible. You can use our training facilities, our spring training facilities, as well as our Rowdies training facilities to play your early round matches and give everybody the opportunity to play their final on the field. Again, this is just another way that we think we can drive those tourists who otherwise wouldn't be in part of our economy into Tampa Bay all year long.
Mm-hmm. So in addition to inside the stadium, what's going to happen in terms of the areas surrounding the stadium, right? We all know that activation of space usage is very important, because when fans come to enjoy a ball game, they not only want to enjoy the game itself, they also wanted to have pre-game and after-game experience. How do you envision the development of around the stadium would be? Would that include a lot of food, bar, retail, or other types of development? Or do you even have in mind, for example, an example of another ballpark as possibly a model or something to learn from?
Sure. I would point to Coors Field and where the Nationals play in Washington, D.C. as a couple great examples in Denver and D.C. of what kind of growth and development you get around a ballpark and how fast that growth comes out of the ground. To properly gain all the benefits that a professional sports team, specifically a Major League Baseball team, can bring to an area, you want to have an opportunity to catalyze development in the surrounding area. We expect to bring well over 1 million people a year and to baseball and Rowdies games, and then another million plus to all the other events that we'd have. And if you're driving 2 million people to a place year round, you're going to see that growth come, and that growth come quickly, but also organically. Where we've made a mistake here with Tropicana Field, and where old stadium models I think have failed, is when you put a ballpark in the middle of a sea of parking. And so we want to avoid that. It's not good for fans, because having everyone ingress and egress from the same location is actually bad. And you also don't get any of that economic development and growth that you really want. And so we want our fans parking a 5 to 10 minute walk away, going past lots of restaurants, lots of bars, lots of retail. We want people to be able to live in the neighborhood. And then, of course, when they leave, they walk the first 5 minutes and all get onto different roads from there to reduce congestion at the most narrow points. I think we've got really exciting opportunities to do that in a couple locations here in Tampa Bay, and they've identified a great location to do the same in Montreal.
Wonderful. So then let's put that lens and focus specifically in Tampa Bay. When you are talking about that type of development involving retail, entertainment, food and beverage, do you think there may be a competing factor there in terms of what will be around the stadium? Will they also become, a competition for facilities in the area? For example, Ybor, Channelside, downtown St. Pete. Do you feel a competition there, or is that a concern?
I think it's a great thing. I think in across Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg, Tampa, and really every other one of the cities around here, even Sarasota, you've seen just incredible amounts of growth over the last few years. And it's not like one restaurant popping up is putting another one out of business. In fact, we're just enhancing our community and keeping up with the population growth. That's what we envision happening here. We can just supercharge it a little bit. And if you look at the landscape around Tampa, for example, and you look at Ybor City, which is one of the areas that we're focused, you see a lot of parcels of land that you can imagine a lot more happening on. And the same is true here in St. Petersburg. In fact, the same is true on the 86 acre parcel of land in which I'm sitting right now. A ballpark allows that to happen much more quickly, to get tax dollars in coffers a lot faster, and we're really eager to make that happen. It's one of the most exciting parts of the project. But just to be clear, we're not developers. We want to provide that value, create that increased incentive and likelihood of success around the ballpark for all the businesses and developers who do know how to do that sort of project.
Mm-hmm. So in essence, what I hear from you is that you don't see there is a competition. Instead, what you see is a synergy, a possibility for synergy, because the ballpark being a particular location could potentially drive the growth in its surrounding areas, whether it's being Ybor or Channelside or downtown St. Pete or any other areas you mentioned.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think I'd be hard pressed to think of a business that's going to suffer by virtue of being in close proximity of a venue that's going to be programmed the way that ours will be.
Good. So then let's also talk about connectivity here, right? In addition to a tourist site and sports designation, is there any other way that the new ballpark can potentially drive economic growth, particularly if the stadium ends up to be in Tampa or the Tampa area? How will the stadium link downtown Ybor and the proposed gasworks development, Water Street, East Tampa, and more?
Well, I think if you look across the country, transit systems usually put a hub right around baseball stadiums. And the reason they do that is because it generates traffic. There's a reason for people to ride. More ridership helps the economics of any transit system. And that's what we want to be a part of. And we obviously benefit from it too. We want people to be able to get to our games as easily as they possibly can. And so when we build this new ballpark, we'll be thinking about mobility every step of the way. And we'll be designing for it to be as efficient as possible. And we'll be designing for it in cooperation with whatever transit initiatives are out there. If it all comes together really nicely, you'll see something that works beautifully, I think, makes it easier for fans to get to our games, and also makes the transit system work better for everyone. As I suspect transit initiatives in Tampa Bay are just a monster. They're really complicated to deal with. They involve all sorts of municipalities and government agencies, and we've supported, I want to say, 5 or 6 referendums already to this point, none of which have been completely successful. So if our ballpark can help the economics of a transit system make a little more sense for everybody and help push it over the hump, that would be just an added bonus for the entire region.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. And actually, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, specifically, there has been a lot of talks and also news about Bright Line being one of the express trains in the country. They already is under construction in their Orlando station, and there has been constant news report about them coming to Tampa. I know there are certain specific business dealings and discussions you are not able to talk to the public about, but to the extent you can talk to us, can you give us more concrete ideas about the transit system you're talking about? Does it involve mass transit, expressway, and also what are the elements of transit that will make this easy and more inviting for the fans and guests?
I would love to see a mass transit system come, and I'm cheering Brightline on. I don't have any inside information. I'm not privy to any specifics around that beyond what we've all tried to read in the newspaper and to sort of guess where they may be heading and how it may go. So I can't comment on that specifically other than to say I absolutely believe that any additional connectivity is going to be great for our community. And in particular, it's going to be great for some of those in our community who need assistance. It's just way too hard for many people in our workforce to get to their jobs. We are way too car dependent, and all those issues lead to more congestion on our roads, in addition to more difficult, more hardship for individuals. So it's a great thing. We're supportive of just about any transit initiative. We do think we need to be smart about it, obviously. What we can't control is thinking through how we're going to guide cars in, how we're going to manage ride-sharing services, what some of the immediate options are around the ballpark. Tampa's got a trolley system. We know that we can use technology in a way now so that if we know that you're coming from a particular county or city, we can tell you where to park so that you can get in and out most easily. And we can try to divert and plan to put our parking lots in places that are going to reduce congestion. That's all the stuff that we're trying to think about. I wish I had more specifics, but until we know exactly where we're going to be and what's going to be around us, it's hard to go into any more detail.
Understand that part, but let's now talk a little bit more about parking, right? Because parking is part of the transit and interconnected. And when early on you were discussing how the ballpark will look like, and you were discussing that when people park, then they will walk about 10 minutes or 5 minutes to the game, and then in between they will experience entertainment. They will entertain food and beverage and other things, and so. How many parkings, given the new trend about people doing ride shares and mass transit, how many parking spaces in a ballpark, right, are you thinking about we will be needing for this new ballpark?
Look, we know we're going to need probably a couple thousand parking spots just dedicated to folks who are directly connected to our operations. But depending on where we go, again, one of the great things about a ballpark and about a place that's going to host a bunch of events is most of those events are exactly when most of our lots are empty. The workforce typically leaves at 5. Our fans will be arriving at 6 or 6:30. And so what we can do is utilize resources, parking lots that already exist, and simply make them more efficient, more economically viable. Any additional parking that we build obviously just adds off-hours parking options that we need, on-hours parking options that others can utilize. So it should be a synergistic relationship, and that's certainly what we want to capitalize upon. But wherever we go, the first thing we're going to make sure we understand is how many spots are likely to be available in the surrounding neighborhoods that already exist.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So my next question is kind of a shifting gear, talking about money, talking about dollars, which is very, very important. Without that, we cannot move forward with the plan. So can you specifically talk about how the new ballpark will be funded locally?
I don't know the specifics. The truth is we need to worry about how we're going to fund our portion of it. And we're agnostic to indifferent about how the public wants to approach it. What we need to figure out is exactly where we're going to build, how much the ballpark is going to cost, and how we're going to split it up. My expectation is that the public side of the equation will be very similar to how stadium deals have been done across the country and here in Tampa Bay for generations now. Tourist development taxes are obviously a popular source, but we're open to really anything and everything. When all is said and done, again, I imagine it looks very similar to how pretty much every venue gets built these days.
Mm-hmm. So no specifics yet. Is there a general idea of how much it will cost?
Yeah, it's important that I not comment on the specifics because they aren't my decisions to make. Public officials are wrestling with this issue. They're evaluating their side of the equation right now, and they deserve the space to be able to do that without me commenting on it too specifically, at least.
Okay, we may come back to that point later. Another question is that given our community and development series focuses on economic and real estate development, so how does the sister city plan work with the city of St. Petersburg's redevelopment plan of the CHOP site? And do you envision the Rays organization or ownership to be somehow involved in that redevelopment effort?
If we wind up building in St. Petersburg, we'll have to be intimately involved with the development that goes on the site. In the event that we're not here, it's not much of our business. And so we haven't participated in the RFP process around the development on the land. That really is irrelevant to us until we figure out that we're going to build a ballpark right here.
Mm-hmm. I see. And then Brian, before I go on with some of my questions, I see that there are a couple of questions came in from the audience. Maybe we answer a couple of them before we move on to the other questions.
Sure.
So there is one from one of our audience members. So hello, Brian. As a huge Rays fan, the two-city plan is obviously disappointing as it cuts out 50% of an opportunity to see games because there are still fans who want to see all the games. As I understand it, the driver is attendance because it is the portion of team profits that are used towards league revenue sharing. It seems like the league is punishing the Rays for being good stewards of revenue sharing dollars. The idea is for these dollars to be used to create a competitive product. Seems like the system is working as intended. Do you have any reaction to that?
I mean, if I could convince the other 29 owners in Major League Baseball to have that same opinion, we might not be having this conversation. Unfortunately, the revenue sharing numbers that are being delivered to the Rays year in and year out are a source of intense frustration to the rest of the league. It is their belief that when a team is performing the way that ours is on the field, we should be contributing to the revenue sharing pool, not being the largest or second largest recipient of those dollars. And that's why we're here. Whatever we do, our future needs to be blessed by Major League Baseball. And if they don't believe that our new situation is going to dramatically improve our revenue picture, they're not going to sign off on it. And we've seen some other ballparks get built in this state, including that haven't solved those issues. And baseball is very concerned about inviting another long-term drag on the entire industry in Tampa Bay. I'm not particularly sympathetic to the Yankees complaining about the Rays beating them at a much lower payroll and continuing to need revenue sharing dollars. But my sympathies are not relevant to the approval process. So we need to figure out a way to dramatically improve our revenues, and that's what this does. I appreciate that fans would love the opportunity to go to 80 games, but the vast majority of our fans go to between 1 and 3 games, and almost everyone goes to 5 games or fewer. You'll obviously have that opportunity in a new outdoor ballpark during the nicest time of year. And what we are banking on happening is that fans will come to those games. And if you go to 4 games now, that's 4 out of 81. If you go to 4 games then, that's 4 out of 40. That's effectively doubling our attendance. And we've got to double our attendance or better. I don't know that there's another way to do it. That's why we're completely focused on Sister City. As you know, we spent 3 years working to try to build a full season dome stadium in Ybor City a few years ago. And the revenue that we would receive did not warrant the amount that we would have to put into the facility. It simply didn't make economic sense. The public view of it was that the amount that they would have to pay didn't make sense either. We had a big gap. What we've done here is knock several $100 million off the cost of the ballpark by eliminating the roof. And we've dramatically improved the Rays revenue picture at the same time. And that's why I believe there's a chance to actually narrow that gap and keep this team in Tampa Bay for generations. I absolutely appreciate that this is a hard thing for our fans to digest. And I appreciate that many find it troubling. And I wish there was a better way. But we've spent 17 years now working on this issue, building our fan base into one of which we can be very proud and of which we are very proud. We want to be here long term. We tried it in St. Pete in 2007. We tried in Ybor a few years ago. The economics simply weren't there to rationalize a over $1 billion investment combined from the community and the team. With this sister city concept, we get greater economic impact. We improve the Rays revenue situation. We allow us to maintain a higher payroll going forward. We solve the Players Association's issues with the team. We solve a lot of the league issues. And I think we're all much better off. And so while it may be unique, may be different, may be a really hard thing to, again, digest when you have your fan hat on, if you're really honest about the economics and the way that our region works, I truly believe this is the best and very likely only solution.
Thank you, Brian, for that answer. So the next question kind of ties back into what you were discussing about driving the revenue growth for the team. So one of the things to consider a site selection is there has already been talks about the fact that perhaps in Pinellas County, because of their strong tourist development tax revenue, they will be able to, on the public funding side, be able and be ready, perhaps more so than Hillsborough County, to support the new ballpark from that perspective, from the tourist development tax revenue perspective. But on the other side, you continue to go back to the theme about attendance, about fans going to the games. That from that perspective, it seems like Hillsborough would have an advantage in terms of it has a bigger population and also has access to the Tri-County area easily. So how do you balance the competing factors in your site selection? I know the decision hasn't been made yet, and a lot of people are involved in that decision making, but can you share with us your thoughts about some of the key factors that will go into the selection process?
I think you just summed it up almost perfectly. We've got to balance the cost of the ballpark to us with the expected incremental revenues that we're going to get. We weren't able to find any location in Tampa Bay that justifies the over $1 billion investment in a roofed stadium that is necessary. With this option, because we're leaning on another community in Montreal for support, we've got a lot more leeway, so to speak. We will be able to sign a second television deal. We will be able to, we think, hold on to most of our corporate sponsorship money at the same levels that it currently exists. I certainly hope Carlton Fields will maintain an investment level with the Rays the same as they do now. That might mean twice as many tickets for each game. It might mean a bigger sign. But many companies have said, yeah, we will keep our budgets at the same level that they are today. And so we're talking about doubling our sponsorship revenue. When you look at doubling TV, doubling sponsorship, doubling ticket sales, you get to a position where there's a little less pressure on Tampa Bay to put in 30 to 35,000 people every single night, which is what it takes to get to average in the league. Also narrowing the supply of games, we give ourselves a better chance to increase the attendance. So that's what we're thinking about. You are not incorrect. We recognize that the economics in Tampa are a little bigger because it is the business and geographic center of the area. We also recognize that we're on a very valuable parcel of land that we have, rights to for another 7 years here in Pinellas County, and that the tourist development tax in Pinellas County is very robust, though it's growing rapidly in Hillsborough. And kudos to the CVBs on both sides of the bay for continuing to excel, particularly after these incredibly challenging years. It's exciting. There's real opportunity here. We'll take any solution we can get. It's never been easy to make baseball work in Tampa Bay. And so if we come up with a way to make sure that this team's here for at least another 30 years, I'm going to feel great about things.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that answer. So another question, which is that, economic growth is fundamentally driven by people. And we know that Rays employs a lot of highly paid personnel, including players, staff, admin people, and a host of other people. So under the Sister City plan, will the Rays headquarters, admin staff, and players stay in St. Pete or Tampa Bay region, or will they decamp to Montreal? And what do you specifically anticipate the players' family will do? Because we know that those personnel, where they live, where they play, also are a big factor to drive the economic growth.
Great. So let me hit on the players first. Every player in Major League Baseball has to spend a couple months in spring training every year. If you're a Seattle Mariner, you go to Arizona, you spend February and March there, and you're away from your family. And that's, by the way, right in the middle of the school year. What we're going to do is allow our families and our players to stay in the same location February, March, April, May, and the beginning of June, really right until school lets out. And so there's an argument to be made at the very least that this will actually be more convenient for many players. They're only going to move one time. They're going to go up to Montreal. They're going to finish the season there, and then they can come back to Tampa Bay and go on with their lives. We anticipate having 2 fully operational staffs in each market. The baseball operations crew will have to be the same, but the rest of our business is very different. And in both venues, what we'll be doing is working our tails off to provide the best possible baseball experience when those games are going on, but also to program the facility year round. And so we anticipate needing every bit as many staff as we have right now, if not more. And we expect them to be every bit as busy as they are now, if not more. The same would be true in Montreal. If you had to say, where is our headquarters? I suspect that you would say that it's going to be in Tampa Bay, but the headquarters of the Canadian operation will certainly be up in Montreal as well. I plan on staying here. This is where my family lives, and we want to be here for a very long time.
Thank you. So then, since we're talking about Montreal and potentially there will have a Canadian headquarters, so it's natural to think that when you are putting one team in two cities and two ballparks, the two hosting cities somehow will have a natural connection to each other. Do you agree with that sentiment? If so, will there be any deliberate and conscious steps taken to ensure and strengthen the economic and the cultural ties of the two regions?
Yeah, so first of all, when I mentioned those economic impact studies earlier, it did not take into account anything that I'm about to talk about. But I think the most exciting part of this is the international connection that we can make between our two markets. We are so naturally tied to each other already. Montrealers visit Florida at either the highest or second highest clip, I think, in the area, in the state. Please don't quote me on that, but it's a lot of Canadians come to Florida. I don't think I'm breaking news with that. We want to enhance that relationship even more. We want them buying condos, living in our area, spending nights here. We have already been in touch with many of the bigger businesses up there that are talking about opening U.S. headquarters in the area and wanting to connect there. The airports are thrilled. They believe that this type of relationship is going to spur direct flights and all the associated economic impacts that come from that. We think that everything from cuisine to the arts, music, and of course, business and cultural connections can really change both areas so much for the better and create a ton of excitement. I have a lot of fans who have said, okay, most say this idea has taken a lot for me to come around to. But now that I think about it, going up to Montreal for a weekend in August to watch my home team play sounds pretty fantastic. We know Montrealers are saying the same thing about the opportunity to come down here and maybe catch opening day and some spring training games. You can't define, you can't picture, you can't even know what's going to happen here, but creating this kind of connection through a sports team, the possibilities are next to limitless, and they really do get me excited. And again, we have already introduced some business leaders and community leaders to one another. Once travel between the two countries gets a little easier, we're going to be doing trips. We're going to be making those connections more real. And I suspect that when we get to the point that we've got a plan to put shovels in the ground in both cities, you're going to see a robust B2B connections coming out of the ground too.
Mm-hmm. So we just got another question from our chat box. But this is really concerning, the community, and we care about our community. And I think one way or another, it has a huge impact on our community. So I think our efforts and time is well spent on talking to you. So the next question, like I said, from one of the audience members is they want to find out what the team will be called. If you guys have an idea now, is the Tampa Bay Rays or the Montreal Rays or the Tampa Bay Montreal Rays or something else?
All of those are possibilities. We have not figured that part out. We want to have a whole lot of community input into that. We want to have some fun around it. It's an exciting opportunity to rebrand the organization. Look, me specifically, we're pretty partial to the Rays brand that we launched and developed in 2008. And by the way, since then, we've been, I think, the third best team in all of Major League Baseball. So we're pretty tied to it. We really like it. Montreal has a strong affinity for the Expos brand. What we'd like to do, if we can figure out how to do it, is honor both markets, honor the baseball history there, honor all of our fans and all those who love the game. But I'd ask anyone on this webinar, and just anyone out there in the universe, if you've got a great name for the team, please submit it to us, put it in the chat, and we'll consider absolutely everything.
Mm-hmm. Great. So then let's go back to some of the stadium questions. If it proves difficult to convince the community and the politicians to build a brand new ballpark locally, is renovating the Trop Field even an option at all?
It's a great question. I don't think so. My current understanding of St. Pete's desires is that the Trop needs to go and this piece of land needs to be developed in a way that is more forward facing. And so I expect that to continue to be the case. And to your earlier point, it is already proven to be difficult. We've been at this for over 15 years trying to figure out where we're going to play in 2028. It's just now that the burner is being turned up a little bit to make sure we come up with something quick because we don't have any more time to waste.
Right. Then going back to the point about the site selection within the Tampa Bay region, St. Petersburg and other parts of Tampa Bay region, is it correct to say that because the Tampa area would potentially have a bigger draw to attendance, that the Rays organization would be willing to put up more private dollars if the stadium is to be put in Tampa versus St. Pete?
I can't say for certain until we really understand the exact amounts of what we're talking about and all the specifics. But I think that economic premise obviously makes a lot of sense. We think about our contribution to the ballpark as a mortgage payment. We're going to have to finance it and we're going to have to pay it, and that's going to come off of our top line every year. And so we need our revenues after revenue sharing to more than exceed that mortgage payment, or there's really no point to what we're doing. That's the way we think about it. If the revenue picture is better in Tampa and we get confident around that, that would inform obviously the amount that we could put into a ballpark there versus in another location. What we've been able to do here across the board, again, is increase the amount that the Rays can put towards a ballpark that will cost less than for a full season. And so again, that gap that we couldn't overcome for a full season in Ybor City, we've got a really good shot at overcoming now.
Mm-hmm. I see. So suppose you get to the end of the Tropicana Field lease and then don't yet have a deal, and hopefully you will have a deal, right? But if that is the case, right? Do you have a contingency plan in place, or do you think the city of St. Pete will let you stay for a few years?
I have no idea. We don't have to face that reality yet. It would be I think it'd be a really unfortunate reality for me, for our organization, and for this area. I've been here for 17 years trying to do everything I possibly can to secure the future of this team in the region. We're really proud of what we've done. We wanted to win baseball games, provide a great fan experience, and be a good corporate citizen. And I think we've done all those things. We want to continue to do all these things. We've found a way to pull that off. We're going to keep trying to make our case to the community, and we're going to do it as compellingly as we can. But I don't allow myself time to think about, well, what if we can't? Because I don't like any of the answers.
I see. So another audience member just asked a question: how much has the city of Montreal and the province committed to a new ballpark over there, if they have made a commitment?
They are engaged in discussions very similar to how we are down here. It would be inappropriate for me to talk about what they've committed, which sources they're considering, because those conversations, like the ones we have down here, are behind closed doors and subject to our trust and confidentiality with one another. Suffice it to say, when all is said and done, I expect the two deals to be similar in nature, and I think both markets think that's important. And so we're going about it in such a way. I will say that I'm really pleased with the progress we've made up there in particular.
Mm-hmm. So is it in the way that, when I think about some of the deals we do, is it basically the two sister cities on each side will be contingent upon each other, right? Because you can't just have one ballpark that plays 40 games without another ballpark playing 41 games. So will the negotiation with each city as well as other stakeholders basically be contingent upon each other?
Yes, that's absolutely right. We need each municipality to agree to a deal. We need to make sure that we're going to be able to build two ballparks. We need Major League Baseball to sign off on that agreement. That's what has to happen, and that's what we're going to make happen.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the stadium itself, drilling down on some of the details, you are talking about bringing in concerts and other activities, and also mentioned the fact that it will definitely be an open air stadium. So can you specifically talk about some of the design elements that will be included in order to allow the flex use of the stadium?
In order to allow, sorry? Oh, the flexible use?
Flexible, yes.
So Populous are architects and designers, and they're absolutely phenomenal. And they're really excited about building the most flexible space they've ever built. We've shoehorned soccer fields into baseball stadiums before, but we've never designed with the idea in mind at the outset. And that makes this opportunity really, really exciting for us. We're also considering, what the vistas look like, what we're, how we're going to look out onto, various parts of Tampa and Montreal, making sure that whatever we do is absolutely spectacular. And we also want to build a building. I use the term porous. I want to be sure that if in late November there isn't an event going on, you and your family can walk right onto the field and have a picnic or throw a frisbee or play wiffle ball out there. And if you want to use one of our suites for a meeting space and jump on our Wi-Fi and have a cup of coffee, that's available too. And so we're designing with all those elements in mind. I hope to have some really beautiful pictures of what could be in the near future. The most exciting part for me is that by going smaller and going outdoor, we can build something that really fits into the landscape of Tampa Bay and of Montreal. If you've ever been to Tropicana Field, it looks like a giant alien spaceship has landed in the middle of an otherwise reasonable sized city. That's not going to be the case with what we build next. It's going to be very organically fit into the surrounding neighborhood.
So that makes, I think, some of the people excited about the design. So any specific timeline on when the designs will potentially be unveiled?
I can't say yes to that. No. We're working on it. We know that designs can create excitement. We want that excitement. But as you know, we had a little PR stumble and with this last week. We want to be very careful about how we talk about things, particularly during this postseason. It's a daily struggle for us to figure out how to balance the importance and urgency of figuring out our future without detracting in any way from this incredible team, the best team in Rays history that's on the field. And so I'm trying to be as respectful as I can of that dance. I don't suspect we'll handle it perfectly along the way as we have it to this point. But I will tell everybody that we're really trying to be thoughtful about it and do our best with it.
Thank you for that comment. So another question we had was that, do you think that if the sister city concept becomes successful, and I want to say that on the playing front, as you said, that Rays has one of the smallest payroll, yet has one of the most successful team. And so you guys have been so innovative, so successful in that regard. If you are able to translate the ball playing success into also the operation and the ballpark success, do you think potentially other teams in smaller markets would also consider similar model?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think when you look at the markets that MLB expansion talks around, whether it be Portland or Nashville or Austin or Raleigh, Durham, Charlotte, you'd see that a lot of them are similarly sized to Tampa Bay and Montreal, and you can appreciate why Major League Baseball has thought twice about putting teams in those places. If putting a team in that place may get you an expansion fee, but if it also comes with a revenue sharing obligation that's likely to go forward in perpetuity, no matter how successful the team is on the field, which is, let's make no bones about it, that's what's going on with the Rays. That's something the league has to consider very carefully. If you give these municipalities the opportunity to build more affordable ballparks that can be used year round for all sorts of other, civic good, and the opportunity to use another city to help bolster the really high payrolls that we need in Major League Baseball. And again, unlike any other league in North America, Major League Baseball doesn't have a salary cap. We go up against the Yankees in a way that's very different than the way Buccaneers go against the New York Giants. And so we have to be economically more competitive than they might have to be in the other leagues. So yeah, I think it'll be considered. I think it's a really interesting proposition, and we'd love to be trailblazers there, just as we have been on the field in so many ways.
Mm-hmm. So another question I think a lot of people have in mind is that we understand the allocation of the regular season games, the first basically 40 or 41 games in the Tampa Bay region, the next 41 games in Montreal. But what will be the playoff games be held at? And I think that will drive a lot of people's decision of getting season tickets and other considerations. And so have you guys, I'm sure, have given some thoughts to that. Can you share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, we talk about the schedule being half and half and the first half and second half because it's important right now to recognize that that may be the way we have to do it. But we are trying to build as much flexibility into the process as possible. And so depending on how our players feel about it, how it affects us competitively, what the Players Association has to say, we're certainly open to trying to play a few games at the end of September in Tampa Bay, for example, or trying to play one early series up in Montreal to try to generate some excitement. We want to have as much flexibility as possible. We just don't want to oversell our ability to do that because it will have to come in conversation with our players and with the rest of the league. You could imagine though a scenario where it just is convenient if we say are playing the Miami Marlins 1 week and our next home games could be at Tropicana Field. That would reduce travel and a whole bunch of other things versus going all the way to Canada, similar to what the Blue Jays up there. So we want to be able to look at each year's schedule and try to put our home season together in the way that makes the most sense. We'll certainly guarantee a minimum number of games. I'm going to just put the number 35 plus to each market every year to make sure that both places get a full dose of the team. So I've now forgotten exactly what the second point was.
We were just talking about the playoff games.
Oh, the playoff games. Thank you. They have to be. They have to be split. They have to be split between both markets. Playoff games are too wonderful for one market to get access to all of them. The most likely scenario is that the first year that we make the playoffs, they would be in Tampa Bay. The second year that we make the playoffs, they would be in Montreal, and we go back and forth. I do think we will make the playoffs even more frequently than we do now because of our ability to maintain a higher payroll along the way. And with respect to season ticket holders, there's going to be a whole lot of incentive to be a season ticket holder because you'll get to go to the games wherever they are. We'll charter planes and take our season ticket holders up to Montreal for October baseball, and we'll do the same up in Montreal down to Tampa Bay. We expect to do that with our sponsors and everyone else. It's a time to generate excitement and to take advantage of that bridge that we're going to build between the two communities. I think of it as a strong positive for season ticket holders because you may be able to imagine, 81 baseball tickets is expensive. 81 baseball tickets is really expensive if you choose to spend a couple weeks every year in Utah or North Carolina or Canada, as so many people from the Tampa Bay area do. During July and August, our population ebbs. And I can't even begin to tell you how many conversations I have with someone who says, I would be a season ticket holder, but we go to Park City or Boulder, Colorado, or wherever during July. And so it just doesn't make sense for me to have tickets to all those games. Well, that's no longer going to be the case. And you're going to have 40 games to fill instead of 80.
Mm-hmm. I see. So a couple more questions, and then maybe we can start to wrap up. This question concerns, as a part of what you're described to be moving up the spring training game to the new ballpark, but also having Rowdies play in the new ballpark as well. So that would basically also have an impact on the existing arrangement with Port Charlotte with respect to spring training, as well as the current field for Rowdy. So what is the plan for the Rowdies field now? And also, is Port Charlotte on board with respect to the move on the spring training game?
I can't remember exactly how long our use agreement with Port Charlotte goes on, but we will honor that, or we'll work out an economic arrangement that makes sense for both parties. We don't anticipate any major issues there, nor with the Rowdies. The Rowdies currently play at Al Lang. I think it's one of the most beautiful venues on the planet. And we think it probably makes most sense to whichever municipality winds up being the long-term home of the Rays to have the Rowdies play there as well. But if they're not interested in having Rowdies games, we can continue where we are. It's my belief that putting the two teams in the one venue is going to generate more than enough economic impact to rationalize that decision. And so that's the way we're currently approaching it. But the punchline to all of it in my mind is we keep the Rays and we keep the Rowdies. And I think that's the goal here for most of us.
Okay, got it. So we have 5 more minutes left. And Brian, my last question to you is, as your parting wisdom, can you just share the top 3 reasons why the St. Pete and Tampa Bay community should support the Rays Sister City Plan?
Sure. First of all, to all the Rays fans out there, thank you so much for your support. And again, I want to really respectfully say that I appreciate why this is such a hard idea for many to digest. The number one reason is that you get to keep Major League Baseball in your region. The Rays, I think, have been such a great member of the community. I'm so proud of what we've done here. We just came off a year in which we only played 60 games total, in which not one person was able to attend a game live because of the pandemic. And I would suggest that we had as much impact on the psyche and community spirit of the Tampa Bay region as we've ever had. Tampa Bay was nothing short of incredible for so many of us who were able to live through it. And we have stacks of letters, direct messages, texts about how much this team meant to everyone last year. Again, that's a year when not one person could actually see the team live, and which we only played 60 games. So we're talking about keeping a 162 game season, being on TV every single night, being on the radio every single night, and having the opportunity to attend as many games as you want in a beautiful outdoor ballpark that we can actually afford. Without a doubt, number one is you get to keep the Rays. Number two is we should get really excited about connecting to Montreal. It is a unique opportunity. It is a phenomenal city. If we can get creative and put our best minds together and see what can come from this, again, I suspect that we will look back and in wonder and awe at all the great things that come from it. Third and finally is I don't want to underestimate how important having these venues are to municipalities and communities. And again, we're coming off a year where that was evident. Tropicana Field was the single largest tester for COVID in all of Pinellas County, and we were also the most efficient. We've been emergency headquarters for every hurricane that's come through the area, and we would like to do the same in our next venue. We're one of the only places that can host large graduations for colleges and high schools. There are so many things that a community gets from having a building that they can utilize that we want to take advantage of and we want to make sure happens. And so that also comes, by the way, with all those extra events. We miss out on a lot of concerts, on a lot of shows, and a lot of festivals where Raymond James is just a little too big and Amalie Arena, for example, is a little too indoors. This gives us an opportunity to fill that sweet spot in a really cool way. So that's the pitch. If I had 3, the 4th would be economic impact. It's going to be big. It's going to be meaningful.
Well, thank you, Brian, so much for your time and insights. We really learned a lot. And I know that for me and all the audience here, we also have a lot walked away to digest. We also wanted to thank our audience members for your interest and participation. Please stay tuned for Carlton Fields Development Industry Group's next community and development event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.